The sun had barely begun to rise over Willow Creek, a quiet suburban neighborhood known for its manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, and an oppressive homeowners association, HOA, that ruled with an iron fist. The streets were still, the air crisp, and the only sound was the rhythmic pounding of sneakers against pavement. 16-year-old Sophia Martinez loved this time of day. It was her escape, her moment of freedom. With the pressures of high school, college applications, and her parents' high expectations weighing heavily on her shoulders, running was the one thing that kept her grounded. The world felt peaceful, untouched, and for a brief moment, she could breathe. But that peace was shattered when the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser cut through the morning haze. "Hands where I can see them," a voice barked, sharp and commanding. Sophia skidded to a halt, her heart pounding in her chest. She raised her hands instinctively, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "To him, just running," she stammered, her voice trembling. A middle-aged officer stepped out of the cruiser, his uniform crisp, his badge gleaming under the patrol car's lights. Behind him stood Karen Whitaker, the president of the Willow Creek HOA, arms crossed, a smug smirk plastered across her face. "Not anymore," Karen purred, tilting her head slightly. "The HOA has jurisdiction here, and we don't tolerate loiterers or suspicious behavior or—" Sophia's stomach churned. She knew exactly what this was. She had seen the news stories, heard the hushed conversations at dinner tables. She knew how quickly things could spiral out of control. "I live 2 blocks away," Sophia gritted out, her jaw tight. "I run this route every morning. No one's ever had a problem before." Karen shrugged, unbothered. "There's always a first time for everything." "Turn around." Sophia's breath caught. "Are you serious?" Before she could react, she felt the cold bite of steel around her wrists. The handcuffs snapped shut, and her world turned upside down. Sophia sat on the cold, hard bench of the holding cell, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to suppress the shivers running through her body. The dim fluorescent light above flickered every few seconds, casting eerie shadows across the gray cinder-block walls. The room smelled of old coffee, sweat, and industrial-strength disinfectant. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, replaying the events in her head: the flashing lights, the officers' barked orders, the weight of the cuffs around her wrists, and Karen Whitaker's smug, satisfied face. The door creaked open, and Sophia tensed as Officer Daniels leaned lazily against the frame. He was in his late 40s, with a thick mustache and a perpetual smirk that made Sophia's skin crawl. "Next time," he drawled, crossing his arms over his chest, "maybe don't run through private neighborhoods like you own the place." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she knew better than to snap back. Instead, she lifted her chin slightly. "Can I make my call now?" Daniel smirked and jerked his head toward the phone mounted on the wall. "Knock yourself out." Sophia forced herself to stand, her legs stiff and shaky as she made her way across the small cell. She picked up the receiver with trembling fingers and punched in the number. Each ring felt like an eternity. "Hello." Her mother's voice was sharp, controlled, but there was something else beneath its smoothing tightly wound. "Mom." Sophia's voice was soft, weak. She swallowed and tried again. "Dad, I was arrested." The line went dead. When Judge Michael Martinez walked into the police station, the entire room seemed to shift. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Officers straightened in their chairs, and the air grew heavy with tension. Judge Martinez was a towering figure, broad-shouldered, with a suit so sharp it could cut through steel. He moved with the deliberate confidence of a man who had spent decades holding people's lives in his hands. He wasn't just a judge, he was the judge, the kind of man even powerful people feared. "Where is my daughter?" Judge Martinez's voice was low, measured, and carried the weight of a gavel slamming down. Officer Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "We were just following HOA regulations, sir." "She was." Judge Martinez lifted a single finger, silencing Daniels mid-sentence. "Tell me, officer, what law, state or federal, allows an HOA to enforce criminal trespassing charges on a public road?" Daniels blinked, his throat bobbing as he struggled to find an answer. "None came." "That's what I thought," Judge Martinez said smoothly. "Now, release her." Immediately. Within minutes, Sophia was free. She stepped out of the holding cell, her hoodie slightly wrinkled, her hands rubbing absently at her wrists. Her father's gaze softened just a fraction as he took in his daughter. "Go wait in the car, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady. Sophia hesitated, but she knew better than to argue. She gave a small nod and turned toward the door. Judge Martinez turned back to Daniels, his expression carved from stone. "Now, let's talk about exactly how many laws were broken tonight." The next morning, the scandal exploded. News outlets lashed onto the story with voracious hunger, and social media was ablaze with outrage. Headlines screamed, "HOA calls cops on jogging teen. Federal judge takes legal action against corrupt HOA president. Neighborhood racism exposed." Karen Whitaker's phone wouldn't stop ringing. The HOA board members were in full panic mode, their once tightly controlled world crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny. "This is a nightmare," one board member shrieked through the speaker of Karen's phone. Karen, standing in her once immaculate kitchen, barely acknowledged it. She was too busy stuffing clothes into a suitcase, her hands moving with stiff, jerky motions. "Do you have any idea how much this lawsuit could cost us?" another board member demanded, his voice cracking with barely restrained hysteria. Karen clenched her jaw, resisting the urge to throw the phone across the room. She had spent the last 4 hours fielding panicked calls, watching her reputation go up in flames overnight. Then her phone buzzed again. A new email. The subject line made her blood run cold. "Emergency restraining order filed by Judge Michael Martinez." Karen clicked on the email, scanning the document so fast the words blurred together. But the message was unmistakable. Judge Martinez had wasted no time. By the power of an emergency injunction, she was now legally prohibited from stepping foot near his family, his property, or most humiliating of all, the very neighborhood she had once ruled. It was over. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every aisle lined with reporters, legal analysts, and furious residents of Willow Creek. The air was thick with murmurs, hushed whispers, and the quiet clicking of cameras capturing every flicker of emotion that passed across Karen Whitaker's face. She sat at the defendant's table, her back unnaturally straight, but her hands betrayed her clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. The confident, smug woman who had once stood behind the police officers as they cuffed a teenage girl was gone. What remained was a shell of that person, visibly shaken, pale, and exhausted from weeks of legal battles and public humiliation. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Michael Martinez sat behind the towering wooden bench, his black robe crisp, his expression unreadable. He looked down at Karen, his gaze steady, his presence suffocating in its authority. "Do you understand the charges against you?" Judge Martinez asked, his voice low and measured. Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry like sandpaper. "Yes, Your Honor." "And do you realize that your actions resulted in unlawful detainment and racial profiling?" A ripple of tension passed through the gallery. Karen's lips trembled, her eyes darting toward her lawyer, but he gave no indication that he could save her now. She was on her own. "Two didn't mean," Karen began, but Judge Martinez cut her off. "Intent does not absolve guilt," he said, his words final, cold, and delivered without room for debate. Karen let out a quiet, shuddering breath, her shoulders slumping under the weight of it all. Then Judge Martinez reached for the gavel. He lifted it with the same steady composure he had maintained throughout the entire trial. Crack. The sound echoed through the room like a gunshot. Guilty. The word might as well have been branded onto Karen's forehead. It rang in her ears louder than anything she had ever heard. A collective exhale rippled through the courtroom, the moment sinking in like a stone dropping into deep water. It was over. Karen Whitaker was no longer the queen of Willow Creek. She was just another name in the system, another disgraced official brought down by her own arrogance. Karen Whitaker resigned from the HOA that same day, not that she had much of a choice. The board meeting where her fate was decided lasted less than 15 minutes. There was no debate, no impassioned speeches in her defense, just a cold, clinical execution of what everyone already knew was INEVY table. Her resignation letter was short, devoid of any remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Effective immediately, I resign from my position as president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. I will have no further involvement with the organization or its affairs. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet, pitiful retreat. The residents of Willow Creek weren't done reclaiming their community. The very next week, the HOA board, scrambling to contain the damage, called for a vote on whether the association should continue to exist at all. What had once been the unshakable foundation of their neighborhood was now a toxic brand, an institution so tainted by scandal that even its most loyal supporters wanted nothing to do with it. When the final votes were counted, the numbers were staggering. 87 fan tram of homeowners voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. The changes were immediate. The absurdly strict property regulations that had once dictated everything from the length of grass to the precise shade of beige allowed for front doors were gone. Almost overnight, the neighborhood came alive with rebellion. Homeowners painted their shutters vibrant colors. Driveways that had once been empty were suddenly filled with cars, and lawn ornaments, seasonal decorations, and porch swings appeared as if by magic. For the first time in years, Willow Creek didn't feel like a gated kingdom. It felt like a neighborhood. As for Sophia, she went back to jogging, just like she always had. But this time, it was different. There was no more anxiety prickling at the back of her neck, no more second-guessing whether she belonged. She ran freely, her stride strong, the crisp morning air filling her lungs as she moved effortlessly through the streets that had once felt like a battlefield. And then one morning, she rounded the cul-de-sac and slowed to a stop. The HOA office, once the most powerful building in the entire neighborhood, stood eerily silent. The sign had been taken down, the windows were dark, and the parking lot was empty. For years, this had been their fortress, the place where they had held their meetings, where they had dictated who was and wasn't acceptable in Willow Creek. Now, it was nothing more than an abandoned shell of a failed regime. Sophia stood there for a moment, hands on her hips, her breath still steady from the run. Then, slowly, a smirk spread across her lips. She tilted her head, exhaled, and muttered just loud enough for the wind to carry it away. "Guess I own the place now." The dissolution of the Willow Creek HOA sent shockwaves through neighboring communities. News of the scandal spread like wildfire, and soon, other HOAs across the state began to face scrutiny. Residents who had long felt oppressed by their own associations started to speak out, demanding transparency and accountability. In the nearby town of Maplewood, a similar story began to unfold. A young boy named Ethan Carter had been fined for riding his bike on the sidewalk, a rule enforced by the Maplewood HOA. His parents, inspired by the events in Willow Creek, decided to fight back. They organized a community meeting, inviting Judge Michael Martinez to speak about his experience. The meeting was packed, with residents from all walks of life coming together to share their grievances. Judge Martinez stood at the podium, his presence commanding respect and attention. "This is not just about one neighborhood," he began, his voice steady and powerful. "This is about the fundamental rights of individuals to live freely in their own communities. No one should have to live in fear of arbitrary rules and unjust enforcement." His words resonated deeply, and soon, Maplewood residents began to push for changes in their own HOA. The movement spread, and within months, several other HOAs in the region were either dissolved or significantly reformed. Back in Willow Creek, the sense of community continued to grow. The once sterile neighborhood was now a vibrant tapestry of colors, sounds, and life. Residents who had never spoken to each other before were now organizing block parties, community gardens, and neighborhood watch programs. Sophia Martinez became a local hero, her story inspiring others to stand up for their rights. She was invited to speak at schools and community events, where she shared her experience and encouraged others to fight for justice. One evening, as the sun set over Willow Creek, Sophia stood on her front porch, watching the neighborhood come alive. Children played in the streets, neighbors chatted over fences, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and music. Her father, Judge Martinez, joined her on the porch, a proud smile on his face. "You did this, Sophia," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You stood up for what was right, and you changed this community for the better." Sophia smiled, a sense of pride and fulfillment washing over her. "We did it together, Dad. This is our community now." Karen Whitaker, now a pariah, tried to rebuild her life away from the public eye. She moved to a small town, hoping to escape the scandal that had destroyed her reputation. but the past had a way of catching up with her. One day, as she walked into a local cafe, she was recognized by a former resident of Willow Creek. The woman, who had once been a victim of Karen's oppressive rules, confronted her in front of everyone. "You think you can just run away from what you did?" The woman spat, her voice filled with anger. "You destroyed lives with your arrogance and cruelty. You don't deserve to live in peace." Karen tried to defend herself, but the damage was done. The incident went viral, and once again, she found herself at the center of a media storm. This time, there was no escape. Years passed, and Willow Creek continued to thrive. The neighborhood became a model for other communities, a shining example of what could be achieved when people came together to fight for their rights. Sophia Martinez went on to study law, inspired by her father's dedication to justice. She became a prominent civil rights attorney, fighting for the rights of individuals and communities across the country. Judge Martinez, now retired, spent his days mentoring young lawyers and advocating for legal reforms. He often spoke about the importance of standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. As for Karen Whitaker, she faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of what happens when power is abused. Her name became synonymous with arrogance and injustice, a reminder of the importance of humility and fairness. Epilogue: the legacy lives on. One crisp morning, Sophia returned to Willow Creek for a community event. The neighborhood had changed, but the spirit of resilience and unity remained strong. As she walked through the streets, she saw familiar faces and new ones, all united by a shared sense of belonging. At the center of the neighborhood, where the HOA office once stood, there was now a community park. A plaque at the entrance read, "In honor of those who stood up for justice and freedom." This park is a symbol of our shared commitment to a better future. Sophia stood before the plaque, a sense of pride and fulfillment washing over her. She had come full circle, from a scared teenager handcuffed on the side of the road to a champion of justice and equality. As she turned to leave, a young girl approached her, holding a small bouquet of flowers. "Thank you," the girl said, her eyes filled with admiration. "Because of you, we can all be free." Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "No," she replied, kneeling down to meet the girl's gaze. "Because of us. We did this together." And with that, Sophia walked away, knowing that the legacy of Willow Creek would live on, a testament to the power of courage, unity, and the unwavering belief in the right to belong. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.